All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating Bengali fairy tale that honestly holds some incredible wisdom for our modern lives. We're going to unpack the core meaning of this story and figure out exactly what it teaches us about building a healthy, thriving society. On the surface, it's a tale about two very different places, but at its heart, it's a brilliant case study in human behavior, our daily habits, and the true meaning of community. So, picture this. You've got a young princess who is just about to ascend to the throne, and she asks her teacher this deeply profound question. You've taught me all about war and politics, but what actually makes a kingdom happy? I mean, it's a great question, right? We spend so much time obsessing over logistics and infrastructure and economics, but we rarely hit pause to ask what fundamentally generates joy and contentment for everyday people.
Now, her teacher, being incredibly wise, doesn't just hand her a textbook answer on a silver platter. Instead, he tells her the best answers are the ones you find yourself. He actually sends her out on a real-world quest to observe different societies firsthand. He totally understands that true wisdom doesn't come from a lecture. You literally have to go out and observe the real world to get it.
So her journey basically breaks down into four main phases. First, her training with the teacher, then her initial tour of the lands. After that, she does this whole undercover deep dive, and finally, she issues her royal decree.
All right, moving into our first section, first impressions are deceiving.
The princess first arrives in a place quite literally called the Cursed Land. And surprisingly, it actually looks like a blast at first glance. People are partying in the streets, it seems vibrant and super fun. But when you look a little closer, the cracks really start to show. And it starts with the kids' diets. In the Cursed Land, children are having chocolates, marshmallows, and sweet potato fries for lunch. We literally see them tossing perfectly good apples and carrots into the trash in favor of junk food. But over in the neighboring land of Dakota, the kids are packing these incredibly nutritious lunches. Fruit, yogurt, and homemade vegetable cake.
And you know what? Those terrible diets in the Cursed Land have immediate, real-world consequences. All those sugar crashes and bad habits lead directly to a population of rude, impatient adults. The princess sees grown-ups constantly bickering in the streets, rushing around saying they're too busy, and incredibly, being totally dismissive of the elderly. They actually snap that the king has no time for old people. The sheer lack of basic human respect is just shocking.
But then, and this is a huge contrast, she visits Dakota, and the shopkeepers there actively welcome tourists. They don't just point them down the street, they literally hand them free, freshly made vegetable meals purely out of kindness, just saying it is our duty and responsibility to take care of guests. It's an absolute night-and-day difference in how human beings are treating one another.
Which leads us to our next section. Behind closed doors.
So the princess goes back to her teacher, totally baffled. How can two places existing side by side be so incredibly different? Well, he gives her this crucial piece of advice. Find a happy family and a sick person in both lands, and you will find your answer. Basically, he's saying you can't just look at public spaces to understand a society. You have to look at what people do behind closed doors and, more importantly, how they treat their most vulnerable members when things get tough.
She takes this to heart and actually goes undercover. She takes a job as a maid in a supposedly happy household in the Cursed Land, just asking for food and a place to crash. And almost immediately, she watches the lady of the house being unbelievably lazy. Instead of doing any work, this woman just sits around gossiping about her friend Martha, claiming Martha faked a homemade chocolate cake. And the whole time, she's complaining about how exhausted she is despite literally doing nothing. And then, get this, the lady of the house goes out, and her car wheel completely breaks down. A kind stranger from Dakota just happens to be passing by, stops and fixes her wheel entirely for free. Now you think she'd be thrilled, right? A stranger just saved her day.
Well, think again. Her reaction is actually astonishing. She comes home griping that the helpful guy meddles too much and that he wasted her entire day. Then she just proceeds to yell at her husband for being lazy, all while entirely refusing to lift a single finger to help our undercover princess with the household chores. The entitlement and just complete lack of self-awareness here is staggering.
And that brings us right in to Section 3, The Secret of Dakota. Obviously disgusted by all this, the princess bails and heads back to Dakota, going undercover at a local clinic to see how they handle hardship. She starts observing a sick girl named Sarah and her family. The doctor's advice here is so fascinating and deeply holistic. No magic pills here. He prescribes eating nutritious food every 2 hours to rebuild strength, and literally tells Sarah to spend time walking barefoot on the grass, putting a huge emphasis on the natural environment as a key part of true healing.
Inside the home, the empathy is just off the charts. Sarah's mom, Wendy, insists on feeding her daughter homemade vegetable soup herself, totally prioritizing her kids' care over her own busy schedule. And the beautiful part? Sarah willingly eats the vegetables she usually hates just because she wants to get better quickly so she can help her mom out again. It's this deep, foundational mutual respect that was absolutely nowhere to be found in the Cursed Land.
But the real magic here happens when Sarah's dad gets home from work surprisingly early. How did he manage that? Well, his neighbors, Daniel and Ramo, heard his daughter was sick, so they voluntarily stepped in and finished all his brutal farm labor for him so he could rush home to his family. This is the defining contrast of the whole explainer. The Cursed Land complains about people who help them. Dakota actually steps up and does the literal heavy lifting for their neighbors during a crisis.
Now for the final piece of the puzzle. Section 4. Building a Happy Kingdom.
Armed with all these crazy insights, the princess heads back home, and it hits her. There is no magical spell hovering over these places. The Cursed Land isn't magically cursed. It's literally cursing itself every single day with terrible diets, laziness, and petty arguments. And Dakota? Not magically blessed. It is blessed by the discipline, the healthy habits, and the proactive kindness of the people who live there. A society's happiness isn't just dumb luck. It's built entirely on the daily routines, the physical health, and the empathy of every single citizen.
So, she doesn't just cross her fingers and hope her kingdom turns out okay. She institutes a formal royal decree with a super clear formula to guarantee her kingdom thrives just like Dakota. And the formula is simple. Promote healthy eating, cultivate good daily habits, and actively support the people around you.
And where does this massive change start? Right in the classroom. She rolls out a brand new royal decree for education. She basically tells all the teachers, look, your job isn't just to teach history or war anymore. From that day on, they had to educate kids about caring for their physical bodies, keeping up good dietary habits, and actually practicing kindness and empathy. Learning how to actively live in joy became a core part of the curriculum.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really think about how this applies to you. Take a hard look at your own daily habits, the food you're putting into your body, how you speak to your family, and how you show up for your neighbors. Ask yourself, through your everyday actions, are you building a cursed land, or are you building a Dakota right in your own home? The choice, just like the princess learned, is entirely up to you.